The morning of December 4, 1926. A narrow chalk road in the county of Surrey, in the south of England. The road curves down toward a natural depression in the landscape, a flooded chalk quarry known locally as the Newlands Corner Silent Pool. It is a cold morning. The kind of English winter morning where the mist sits close to the ground and the bare trees hold their frost until mid-afternoon. At the edge of the road, teetering at an angle on the lip of a steep chalk bank, is a motor car. A Morris Cowley. Its engine has run dry of petrol and stopped. Its headlights are still switched on, the battery draining into the cold morning air. On the rear seat of the car, someone has left a fur coat and a small leather suitcase. The driver is not there. There is no sign of where she went. No footprints that survive in the frozen chalk leading away from the vehicle in any clear direction. No witness who saw the car arrive or the driver leave. No note. No disturbance. Nothing except the car itself, tipped slightly toward the void, engine cold, lights burning uselessly in the grey December light. The car is registered to Mrs. Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie. Already, in December 1926, one of the most celebrated mystery writers in the English-speaking world. The creator of Hercule Poirot, the precise, brilliant, mustachioed Belgian detective who had been solving impossible crimes in her novels since 1920. The woman whose plots turned on hidden identities, psychological misdirection, and the gap between what people say and what they have actually done. She is gone. For 11 days, 15,000 volunteers will comb the English countryside looking for her. The newly formed Royal Air Force will deploy aircraft to search from the sky. Every major newspaper in Britain will carry the story on its front page. Police across 2 counties will coordinate in a search unlike anything England had seen for a private individual. The most famous mystery writer in the country has become the mystery. And when she is found, alive, in a hotel in the spa town of Harrogate in the north of England, registered under a false name, apparently in good health, apparently remembering nothing, she will never, for the remaining 50 years of her life, give a complete public explanation of what happened. 3 questions have sat inside those 11 days for nearly 100 years. Where did she go, and why? Did she plan it, or did something break inside her that cold December night? And why, of all the names in the world she could have chosen, did she register at that hotel as Mrs. Neele, the surname of the woman her husband was in love with? If this is the kind of storytelling you are looking for, real mysteries, unanswered histories, cases that sit at the edge of what we can know, consider subscribing to Enter the Crime. Global true crime told like a documentary. But to understand those 11 days, we have to understand the year that led to them. And the year that led to them was, by almost any measure, the worst of Agatha Christie's life. England in 1926. For international viewers who may not know this period of British history, a brief orientation. England in the mid-1920s was a country still processing the aftermath of the First World War, the catastrophic conflict of 1914 to 1918 that killed approximately 900,000 British soldiers and left almost no family in the country untouched by loss. The 1920s in England are a decade of complicated emotional contradictions, a surface enthusiasm for dancing, jazz, motoring, and modern life running alongside a profound undercurrent of grief that the culture had not yet found language to express. People did not, in 1926 England, discuss psychological breakdown in public. They did not openly acknowledge that a person could be destroyed from the inside by accumulated loss. The vocabulary barely existed. The social permission certainly did not. This matters enormously for understanding what happened to Agatha Christie in December of that year. Because what happened to her did not begin in December. It had been building for the entirety of 1926. Agatha Mary Clarissa Miller was born on September 15, 1890, in Torquay, a coastal resort town on the southwestern tip of England, on the English Channel, known for its mild climate and its red sandstone cliffs. She was the youngest of 3 children in a comfortable, unconventional household. Her father, Frederick Miller, was an American gentleman of means who died when Agatha was 11, her first encounter with loss, and one she processed, in the way that would become her lifelong pattern, mostly alone and mostly inward. Her mother, Clara, was a woman of vivid imagination and deep emotion who home-educated her children in ways that encouraged creative and intellectual independence. Agatha learned to read, largely, by herself. She began writing stories as a child, not because anyone told her to, but because she found in fiction a space where the world made sense in ways it often did not in ordinary life. She met Archibald Christie, Archie, in 1912, when she was 22 and he was a young officer in the Royal Flying Corps, the precursor to the RAF. He was handsome, athletic, confident, and emotionally contained in a way that is familiar to anyone who has known someone whose feelings run deep but whose face rarely shows it. They married in December 1914, in the first weeks of the First World War, with the practical understanding that Archie might not come back. He did come back. By 1919, they had a daughter named Rosalind and a life taking shape in the Surrey stockbroker belt, the comfortable suburban commuter counties south of London where middle-class professionals built brick houses and kept gardens and played golf. It was during the war years, while Archie was away, that Agatha wrote her first novel. The Mysterious Affair at Styles, published in 1920, introduced Hercule Poirot to the world. The book sold modestly. The character caught something in readers' imaginations that the sales figures did not immediately reflect. By 1926, 6 more Poirot novels had followed, along with short story collections and a second detective, a sharp-tongued, intuitive, elderly spinster named Miss Marple who would eventually become as famous as Poirot himself. Agatha Christie, in 1926, was not yet the global phenomenon she would become by the time of her death. But she was a working, published, increasingly popular novelist with a devoted readership and a growing critical reputation. On the surface, she had a great deal. Beneath the surface, 1926 was dismantling her piece by piece. In April of that year, her mother, Clara Miller, died after a long illness. Agatha had been her primary caretaker during Clara's decline, making regular trips to the family home in Torquay while also managing her own household and writing career. The death was not unexpected, but grief rarely obeys the logic of expectation. Agatha was, by the accounts of people who knew her at the time, badly affected. She had adored her mother. She was not someone who processed grief easily or quickly or publicly. She went quiet in the way that some people go quiet when they are actually very far from all right. And then, in the same year, Archie told her something. He was in love with someone else. Her name was Nancy Neele. She was 33 years old, the daughter of a stockbroker, and she had met Archie through the golf and social circuit of the Surrey suburbs, the same world Agatha and Archie inhabited, which made the information worse in the way that proximity always makes these things worse. Nancy Neele was not a stranger from another world. She was someone from the same dinner tables, the same weekend parties, the same county. Archie told Agatha he wanted a divorce. He wanted to marry Nancy Neele. Agatha, by all available evidence, did not want a divorce. She loved Archie, whatever their marriage had become. She did not want to lose her husband in the same year she had lost her mother. She asked him to wait. He agreed to wait, reluctantly, until after Christmas. So, December 1926 began with that agreement in place. Archie was physically present in the house but emotionally gone. Agatha was writing, she was always writing, it was the one thing that held steady when everything else moved, but the life around the desk was fracturing. On the evening of Friday, December 3, 1926, Archie Christie left the family home at Styles, their house in Sunningdale, Berkshire, a village southwest of London, to spend the weekend at a friend's house in Godalming, Surrey. He was going to see Nancy Neele. This was not a secret within the marriage, though it was not public knowledge. That evening, Agatha Christie put their daughter Rosalind to bed, spoke briefly with the household staff, and at some point between 9 and 11 o'clock at night, she got into her Morris Cowley motor car and drove away. She did not tell anyone she was going. She did not leave a note. She did not come back. The morning of December 4, 1926. The housemaid at Styles discovered that Mrs. Christie had not slept in her bed. The car was gone from the garage. A search of the house found a letter on the writing desk, addressed to Archie Christie's brother, Campbell Christie, saying that Agatha was going to Yorkshire and requesting that anyone who needed to contact her do so through the Yorkshire police. The letter mentioned nothing about where in Yorkshire. It gave no address. It contained no other useful information. It was, as letters go, almost perfectly uninformative. Campbell Christie contacted Archie, who was at the house in Godalming. Archie returned to Sunningdale and the Surrey police were notified. By mid-morning of December 4th, officers were looking for the car. They found it at Newlands Corner, the edge of the Silent Pool Chalk Quarry, at approximately 8 o'clock the following morning, December 5th. The car had apparently been there overnight. The engine was dry. The headlights had burned themselves out. Inside the fur coat, the small suitcase containing a few items of clothing and personal effects, and nothing that explained where the owner had gone. The chalk bank at that location dropped steeply toward the flooded quarry below. The immediate fear, among the police and among journalists who arrived quickly once the story broke, was that Agatha Christie had driven to this spot intending to end her life and that her body was in the water. Divers were brought in. The silent pool was searched. Nothing was found. The search expanded. Dogs were brought in to track a scent from the car. They lost the trail within a short distance. More than 1,000 police and volunteers began combing the surrounding Surrey countryside, the North Downs, the Chalk Hills, the woodland, and farmland between Guildford and the M25 corridor as it would eventually become. Aircraft from the RAF searched from above. The press went into something close to frenzy. The Times, the Daily Mail. Every major paper in Britain ran the story on the front page. Agatha Christie was already famous enough that her disappearance was national news within 48 hours. Theories multiplied. She had fallen into the quarry and her body had not been found. She had been the victim of a crime. She had staged her own disappearance as a promotional exercise for her books. She was suffering a breakdown. She had run away. And here is the detail that changed the character of the investigation almost immediately, because it introduced a note of suspicion that never fully went away. Archie Christie, when questioned by police, behaved in ways that investigators found difficult to read. He was not demonstrably distraught in the manner that would have seemed natural for a husband whose wife had vanished. He was contained, controlled, and, in the estimation of Deputy Chief Constable Ken Ward of the Surrey Police, who led the search, not entirely forthcoming. Ken Ward was blunt in his assessment. He did not trust Archie Christie. Archie, meanwhile, told police something that complicated the picture further. He acknowledged the state of the marriage. He acknowledged that he and Agatha had argued on the evening of December 3rd, before he left for Godalming. The argument was about the divorce. He had, apparently, been pressing her again to agree to it. She had driven away, alone, into the winter night, within hours of that argument. And then Archie said something that the press seized on. He said that he believed Agatha had staged her own disappearance. That she had done it deliberately. That she was, in his view, quite capable of it. This was either the honest assessment of a man who knew his wife well, or it was the response of someone who wanted suspicion redirected away from himself and toward the missing woman. Ken Ward continued to suspect Archie. He had no evidence. He had no body. He had a case that was generating enormous public pressure and producing extraordinarily little in the way of leads. The search went on for 11 days. And then, on December 14, 1926, a musician playing in the band at the Hydropathic Hotel in Harrogate, a spa hotel in the North Yorkshire town of Harrogate, roughly 320 kilometers north of Sunningdale, told hotel management that he believed the woman registered as Mrs. Teresa Neele of South Africa was, in fact, the missing novelist Agatha Christie. He recognized her from the newspaper photographs that had been running for days. Hotel staff contacted the Yorkshire police. Archie Christie was summoned to Harrogate to identify his wife. He arrived at the hotel. He found Agatha in the lounge. By multiple accounts, including those of other guests who witnessed the reunion, there was no dramatic scene. No tears. No visible relief or joy. Archie identified his wife to the police. She appeared, to witnesses, calm. She was taken to a local nursing home for observation. She was declared physically well. And when asked about the 11 days, where she had been, what she had done, why she had registered under the name Neele, she said she had no memory of any of it. That is the official record. What it means is the question that has never been answered. There was no criminal investigation in the formal sense. No crime had been committed that anyone could prove. Agatha Christie was an adult who had been away from home for 11 days and had been found alive. The police closed the search. The press moved on to the next story, eventually. and Agatha Christie went on with her life. But the question of what actually happened during those 11 days never closed. It has generated more sustained analysis, journalism, academic writing, and speculation than almost any comparable disappearance in British history. And the reason is obvious: the woman at the center of it was a professional mystery writer. The impossible coincidences embedded in her story, the name she chose, the hotel she selected, the letter she left that was precisely uninformative enough to be useless, all of it has the structure of a plot. A carefully constructed, deliberately engineered plot. Whether that is what it was is the question. And there are 3 serious answers that the evidence supports to varying degrees. Let me lay them out as fairly as I can, and then tell you where I land on each of them. The first theory: genuine breakdown, a dissociative fugue. This is the theory that Agatha Christie and her supporters always implied without ever fully confirming. The clinical term is dissociative fugue, a documented psychological condition in which a person, typically under extreme stress, loses conscious awareness of their identity and travels away from their normal life without intending to or remembering doing so. The person in a fugue state can appear outwardly functional. They can dress themselves, pay for accommodation, hold conversations, while being internally disconnected from their own sense of identity and continuity. The documented conditions that can trigger a dissociative fugue are exactly the conditions Agatha Christie was living in during 1926. The death of her mother. The collapse of her marriage. The argument with Archie on the night she disappeared. Severe sleep deprivation and emotional exhaustion are also documented contributing factors, and Christie by multiple accounts had been sleeping badly for months. Doctors who examined her after she was found at the Harrogate hotel reported that she appeared confused about her identity and the date. These are consistent markers of a genuine fugue state. A physician who treated her in the days following her recovery stated in his notes, which were made public many years later, that in his professional opinion, she had suffered a genuine episode of amnesia. Here is where this theory runs into difficulty, though. Agatha Christie had driven to Harrogate. That is a journey of roughly 320 kilometers from the Surrey countryside, on roads that, in 1926, before motorways existed in Britain, required active navigation, reading signs, making decisions at junctions. Managing a motor vehicle over many hours. A person in a genuine fugue state capable of executing that journey also had enough cognitive function to register at a hotel, give a plausible false name and a false home country, pay for accommodation over 11 days, and socialize normally with the other guests, who later reported that she had seemed entirely at ease, had taken part in hotel activities, and had shown no signs of distress. This is a very functional fugue. So functional that the distinction between a genuine dissociative episode and a deliberate performance of one is, on the available evidence, impossible to draw. Detectives thought they had their answer when the medical reports came back supporting amnesia. They found the answer didn't fully hold when they looked at what she had actually done across those 11 days. The second theory, deliberate staging, a publicity exercise. The cynical version. The version that newspapers suggested in 1926, that police officers muttered to each other, and that has retained currency in certain quarters ever since. The argument goes like this. Agatha Christie's career, while successful, was not yet at its peak. Her publisher was interested in generating more attention for her work. A high-profile disappearance that kept the name Agatha Christie on the front page of every major British newspaper for 11 consecutive days would be extraordinarily good for book sales. She was a mystery writer. She knew how to construct a disappearance. She constructed one. The evidence that lends this theory some weight, the letter she left for Campbell Christie, which was useless as a genuine communication but remarkably effective as a mechanism to ensure the story would break publicly and quickly. The choice of a hotel and a location, Harrogate, where she was eventually found, was a popular and well-populated spa resort, not the sort of isolated hideaway you would choose if you genuinely wanted not to be found. The 11 days of apparently normal social engagement with hotel guests. The evidence against it, the emotional reality of 1926. Christie had just lost her mother. Her husband had announced he intended to leave her. The idea that someone in That psychological state would calmly execute a weeks-long publicity exercise requires a coldness of calculation that is exceedingly difficult to square with everything else we know about her emotional life in that period. Her book sales did increase after the disappearance. That is documented. But correlation is not causation, and the simplest explanation is that the increased sales reflected the increased public awareness of her name, which would have been true regardless of whether the disappearance was deliberate. I find this theory the least convincing of the three. Not because it is logically impossible, but because it requires us to believe that a woman in genuine psychological crisis manufactured a calm, sustained, professionally executed deception across 11 days of acute personal pain. Possible. But it asks a great deal. The third theory, psychological theater, deliberate revenge. This is the theory I keep returning to. The one that is, to my mind, most consistent with what we actually know, both about what Christie did and about who Christie was. Let me lay out the specific facts that support it, because this theory does not rest on speculation alone. It rests on a series of documented details that, individually, could be coincidental. Together, they are exceedingly difficult to dismiss. Archie Christie was in love with a woman named Nancy Neele. He had told Agatha he intended to leave her for Nancy Neele. He had been pressing Agatha to agree to a divorce so that he could marry Nancy Neele. When Agatha Christie registered at the Hydropathic Hotel in Harrogate, she registered under the name of Mrs. Teresa Neele. Not a random name. Not a borrowed name from a novel. The exact surname of the woman her husband loved. She spent 11 days in that hotel, living publicly under the name of her rival, in a busy, social, well-staffed establishment where she was visible to dozens of people every day, while her husband was publicly and humiliatingly investigated as the possible perpetrator of a crime against his missing wife. Archie Christie spent those 11 days under genuine police suspicion. He was questioned repeatedly. The newspapers noted, pointedly, that the last person to see Agatha before she disappeared was her husband, and that the marriage was in difficulty, and that Archie had a well-documented reason to want his wife gone. Think about what those 11 days were like for him. Think about what they were like for Nancy Neele, whose name was in every newspaper in Britain attached to the word mistress and to a missing woman investigation. And think about who was sitting in the lounge of a comfortable hotel in Harrogate, eating good meals, attending social events, and sleeping soundly, answering to Mrs. Neele. Agatha Christie spent her career writing about characters who exact clever, hidden, perfectly constructed retribution for wrongs done to them. She created a world in which the guilty are always eventually exposed and the wronged are always, in the end, seen. She understood the architecture of misdirection more thoroughly than almost any writer of her generation. The reversal here is not that she disappeared. The reversal is that Archie told police immediately that he believed she had staged it, and that he was both right and completely unable to prove it. Right enough to know it was deliberate. Wrong in his assessment of what he could do about it. He could not say publicly that his wife was playing psychological games with him without also confirming publicly that he had driven her to this point. He was trapped. The public sympathy was entirely with the missing woman. And then she came home. At this point, I want to ask you directly. Of the three theories, genuine breakdown, publicity stunt, deliberate psychological revenge, which sits most convincingly with what you know about what she did? Drop your answer in the comments. Because this case has been debated for nearly 100 years and there is genuinely no settled answer. Here is the final element that I think matters most in evaluating all three theories, and I want to give it the space it deserves. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was alive in December 1926. He was 77 years old and in his late period, deeply committed to spiritualism, the belief that the dead could communicate with the living through mediums and seances. Conan Doyle was the creator of Sherlock Holmes, the most logically precise fictional detective in the history of English literature. He was also, by 1926, one of the most prominent advocates for psychic investigation in the country. When Agatha Christie disappeared, Conan Doyle obtained one of her gloves, a personal item belonging to the missing woman, and took it to a medium to attempt to locate her through psychic means. Hold that for a moment. The creator of Sherlock Holmes. The man who gave the world when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. That man took a glove belonging to the world's other most famous mystery writer to a psychic. The medium told Conan Doyle that Christie was alive and would be found on Wednesday. She was found in the hotel in Harrogate on a Tuesday. One day off. I do not know what to do with that detail. I am not presenting it as evidence of anything supernatural. I am presenting it as the most perfectly constructed coincidence in a case that is full of coincidences that feel too precise to be coincidental. And I am noting Agatha Christie, who understood the power of an unexpected detail placed at just the right moment in a narrative, would have appreciated it enormously. December 14, 1926. Agatha Christie returns to the world. The legal machinery closes around the case with surprising speed. There is no inquest. There is no formal investigation into whether a crime was committed. Surrey police issue a statement that Mrs. Christie has been found alive and well and that the matter is closed. The search is called off. The 15,000 volunteers go home. The press, briefly, turns its attention to the recovery. Reporters camp outside the nursing home in Harrogate where Christie is being observed. They are given extraordinarily little. A statement, relayed through her physician, that she is physically well but suffering from amnesia relating to the events of the past 11 days. No further comment. Archie Christie drives to Harrogate, identifies his wife, and the couple returns to Surrey. They are photographed arriving back at Styles. Neither of them speaks to the waiting reporters. The next 12 months are documented through a handful of personal letters and the accounts of people close to the family. What is documented? Archie and Agatha Christie agreed, quietly, to separate. The divorce was granted in 1928. Archie married Nancy Neele in the same year. They remained married until Nancy's death in 1958. Agatha Christie did not collapse after the divorce, which is the thing that surprises people who expect the story to end in tragedy. She went to the Middle East. She boarded the Orient Express, the famous long-distance luxury train service that ran from London through Paris to Constantinople, now Istanbul, and traveled to the archaeological sites of what is now Iraq and Syria. There she met a man named Max Mallowan, an archaeologist 14 years her junior. She married him in 1930. They remained married until her death in 1976. By almost all accounts, it was a deeply happy marriage. She wrote, without pause, for the rest of her life. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, published in 1926, the same year as The Disappearance, is considered one of the greatest mystery novels ever written, partly for a structural device so audacious that it divided critics on its publication and is still discussed in literary circles today. She continued to produce novels, stories, and plays at a rate that astonished her contemporaries. Her play The Mousetrap opened in London's West End in 1952 and is still running as of 2025, the longest-running play in theatrical history. She was made a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 1971. She never wrote a word about December 1926. Her autobiography was published posthumously in 1977, the year after her death. It is a long and detailed book covering her life from childhood to old age. It covers the early marriage to Archie, the birth of Rosalind, the years of the war, the beginning of her writing career. It covers 1925 in some detail and moves into the late 1920s and the relationship with Max Mallowan. December 1926 is not there. Not an omission that the reader might attribute to editorial choice or structural compression. An absence so precise that it could only be deliberate. The woman who spent her career teaching readers to notice what is not in the room constructed her own life story around a room that remains empty. The documentary record does contain one relevant item that has been discussed extensively in the decades since Christie's death. During the 11 days at the Harrogate Hotel, she wrote a letter. The letter was addressed to her brother-in-law Campbell Christie. In it she said, among other things, that she had gone to Yorkshire for her nerves and gave the address of the hotel. This letter was posted. It arrived at its destination. It was this letter that eventually directed the Yorkshire police to the Hydropathic Hotel and led to her identification. The letter is documented. Its existence has been confirmed. Its full contents have never been made publicly available. A woman who claimed to have no memory of the past 11 days wrote a letter, apparently during those 11 days, addressing it correctly, posting it, and signing it in a way that led directly to her discovery. If she remembered nothing, how did she write the letter? If she wrote the letter, what else did she remember? Those questions have never received an answer. Agatha Christie died on January 12, 1976, at her home in Wallingford, Oxfordshire, a county in the English Midlands, west of London. She was 85 years old. She had outlived Archie. She had outlived Nancy Neele. She had outlived nearly everyone who had been present during those 11 days in December 1926. Whatever she knew, she had kept it for 50 years. She had watched the theories multiply and the journalists write and the biographers speculate. She had given a handful of interviews about the disappearance over the decades, always saying the same thing in slightly different words. She had no memory of what happened. She was ill. She was suffering. She recovered. She moved on. The question is whether that is true, a version of the truth, or the most elegant, sustained misdirection ever performed by someone who understood, better than almost anyone alive, the precise art of giving an answer that answers nothing. Here is the thing about Agatha Christie that I think matters most in evaluating this case. She was not simply a writer of puzzles. She was a writer who understood that the most interesting mysteries are the ones where the solution, once revealed, is both completely surprising and utterly inevitable. Where all the clues were there all along, available to anyone paying the right kind of attention, and yet somehow nobody saw what they were pointing to until the moment of revelation. In The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, the solution depends on the reader trusting a narrator who has been telling the truth in every literal sense, while concealing the most important fact about their own role in events. The narrator does not lie. They simply choose, with great precision, what to include and what to leave out. Agatha Christie's autobiography did not lie about December 1926. It simply leaves it out. If the third theory is correct, if those 11 days were an act of deliberate, controlled, psychologically sophisticated revenge against a husband who had caused her genuine harm, then what she did in the years afterward was equally sophisticated. She went on. She succeeded, spectacularly. She lived a good life with a man she loved and work she loved. She became, eventually, the best-selling fiction writer in human history, exceeded in total sales only by the Bible and the complete works of Shakespeare. She took the only story she refused to tell and turned everything around it into literature. The house at Styles still stands. It is a hotel now, near the village of Sunningdale in Berkshire. The silent pool in Surrey is still there, the chalk quarry where the car was found, its headlights burning into the December morning. It is a nature reserve now, with walking paths around the water. People visit it specifically because of the Christie disappearance. There is no resolution at that quarry edge. There is just the landscape, and the road where the car sat, and the cold light that would have come across the chalk hills on that December morning in 1926 when a woman drove away from her life and decided, by whatever mechanism, trauma or theatre or some precise combination of both, to become, for 11 days, someone else. Who she was during those 11 days depends on which story you believe. The name she chose to become was Mrs. Neele. She never explained why. She never needed to.